Picking up where we left off from video RA05, we see we have a nominal benefit of 4.762. In other words, adding up the benefits of everything that's in yellow that's funded, it's 4.762. If we had enough money to fund everything, and we added up all the benefits, that would be called the base case maximum. So suppose we increase the budget to a very, very large amount. We still only have 82.68. Why is that? Well, that's because we said we couldn't fund more than one of this group nor one of this group. So if we want this to be 100%, then we have to say the base case must include groups. So now we're at 100%, and if we leave that base case includes groups, we go back to 45, then at a budget of 45 million, we're actually 65.51% effective compared to what we would be able to achieve if we had enough money to fund everything. Now let's suppose that somebody had a pet project and they said we must do the medical clinic. So if we click must on the medical clinic, notice what happens to the 65.51%. It drops to 51.89%. Well, is that worth doing? If that project's your pet project, is it worth that much effectiveness? This is where the politics and discussions take place. At least you now know that when somebody specifies we must do a pet project, they have some idea of how much it's costing them in terms of effectiveness. Now suppose we remove this must and say that we have to do the must for the stadium. Well, now the effectiveness goes down to 5%. In fact, that's the only thing we can do. So obviously that's clearly not a good solution. What if we want to must do the stadium and the medical clinic? The solution is now infeasible. We can't do both of these, so we have to remove either one or the other, or both. What would the effectiveness be if we raise the budget limit to 85 million? So raising the budget will always increase the effectiveness. However, if we plot this, as we will do later on, we'll see that it's a concave curve. In other words, we get less and less return for the extra dollar as we continue to increase the funding. Now, suppose we look at what we have here and we say, well, it really doesn't make sense to do project 1 without doing project 2. In other words, project 1 depends upon project 2. So what we can do is we can go to the dependencies, and here's project 1 and project 2, and if we right click, we can see choosing this specifies that project 1 depends upon project 2. So with this dependency, we now do project 1 and project 2, and anytime we add a new constraint in, the effectiveness always goes down. It may have turned out that we would do neither 1 or 2, but we know that we can't do 1 without doing 2. If we ignore this dependency, then again we can do 1 without 2. So these boxes here help us ignore certain constraints that we put in.